It's a pleasure and indeed an honor to welcome Dr. Andriukaitis to Yale today to speak here about European memories from the Gulag to the Commission. And those of you who know his life know that that in fact describes a very long path he's taken that began in Soviet Gulag. Dr. Andrew, and I'm using the word doctor because, as many of you know, he is a doctor. He's a heart surgeon, or was, his family was deported from Lithuania in 1941. About 130,000 Lithuanians were deported to labor camps, and about another 150,000 were deported to prison camps, to the gulags. And his parents were deported. He was actually born in the USSR some years after they arrived. It wasn't until several years after the death of Stalin in 1953 that the deportees were allowed to return, and he and his family returned to Lithuania in 1958, I believe, and he studied in Lithuania, studied medicine in Lithuania, was arrested by the KGB in Lithuania, but what is one of the major events in his life was, I would say, the late years of Gorbachev, perestroika, and the development of the Lithuanian reform movement, Sąjūdis, in the 1980s, in '88. And he was involved in that. He was a member. He was elected to the Supreme Soviet when Lithuania still had a Supreme Soviet in 1990 in the first contested elections as a member. And those of you who are old enough to remember that election, you'll remember it was a Sąjūdis landslide. And he became one of the leaders and founders of the Lithuanian Social Democratic Party. And when Lithuania gained its independence, he was deeply involved, both in writing the Act of Independence, in writing the Constitution of Lithuania, continuing to serve in the new Lithuanian Parliament. He was re-elected in 1996 and again in 2000, and over the course of those years became the head of the chair of the Lithuanian Social Democratic Party. He became at one point in 2001 the deputy speaker or deputy chair of the parliament. And this was a time, as you recall, when Lithuania, like Estonia and Latvia and other countries, was involved in the European integration process, moving toward membership, and he chaired the European integration program in Parliament in those years. He was elected again to the Parliament in 2008 and re-elected in 2012 and became a Minister of Health in the Lithuanian government. And then in 2014, he became the Commissioner for Health and Food Safety of the European Union. So it is an extraordinary life and career, unlike, I think, anyone else we've had speak here, in the range of events from a gulag in the Soviet Union in the really bad, dark days to the Commission of the European Union. So it's a real pleasure to have you here and with us today. And I also want to introduce Brad Woodworth, who is a professor of history at the University of New Haven and is the director of the Baltic Studies program here in the Macmillan Center. and someone who has written extensively about the Baltic countries and is going to have a discussion with Dr. Andriukaitis about some of these really historic events that he experienced firsthand. So without further ado, I'll turn the mic. I guess I don't need to turn the microphone over. You have a microphone.
But
So.
if I may, one thing, okay, because first of all, I would like to thank you. Now this guy is Lithuanian president, 2013. At the time, I also member of Lithuanian government, and we were president of the country first time in our history. And I take today European Union time. And it's very important it's very symbolic, you know, first of all. And it's also very important that when we were members of European Convention 2002, 2003, building so-called treaty establishing constitution for Europe, then we proposed to introduce in treaty rule that countries should rotate in presidency, on equal footing. It was our proposal, and now I am very happy that equal footing allowed Lithuania to be presidency country. And now we are here. For me, it's unbelievable event that I am here. Can't you imagine? Thank you very much indeed.
You're
it's
welcome.
very symbolic.
Thank you both very much, and thank you very much for coming to be with us here at Yale. So if you followed this biography, it's beyond astounding. You have lived numerous lives: a life in deportation, a life in those decades of the Soviet Union, from the late 50s into the 1990s, a time that people thought in the Soviet Union and here that might not ever end. And then all of a sudden does. Perestroika, the independence movement, the resistance movement within the Soviet Union of which you were a part. And then all of the events since the early 90s with independence. It's astounding. How do you keep track of all of those different selves within you, all of those different people?
I don't know. I have no answer. Because, you know, now looking back, you know, you see, maybe it was something as you know, as determined, but I don't believe in determinations, you know. From my point of view, my story is not. You can see a lot of people. This is the same story. I remember Ann Tartu, because you mentioned that you're from Estonia. Ann Tartu, and also some dissidents from Latvia. I really remember our meetings in 1972, in 1978. Discussing some issues, you know. You may remember memorandum of 45 dissidents of Baltic states, which was signed in 1978, asking United Nations to discuss issues about occupation of 3 Baltic states. And it was signed by dissidents from Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Of course, I am proud that one of the dissidents was my father, who signed such memorandum. And at that time, you know, it was like strong beliefs that something will happen, you know, and such, like, you know, I can't explain why, but feeling that something will happen, and those messages about freedom will be translated into reality. That follows all my life also. And today it's very difficult to explain how it was, but it was. You know, I can't explain from my point of view. It's part of my life, you know. I can't separate and can't explain. I can't tell what was happened. But dedication to independence, to freedom, it was from I remember my childhood days in polar circle. I was born in Laptev Sea in Arctic Ocean, and it's gulags were built there in terrible situation. Terrible. Of course, for me it was nothing terrible because I was child. I do not saw different world, and it was for me all things were okay because I have mother, father, brothers, and of course international environment. Estonians, Latvians, Karelo-Finns, Ukrainians, Russians, Kazakhs.
So do you remember that period
Of
before
course,
your family came?
I was 5 years when Lager was destroyed. I was 5 years. I remember very well. It's very simple, you know, barracks, 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 and tundra around. Nothing.
So your parents had been there already 10
Yeah,
years before
No,
you...
my parents were deported. They were arrested in 1941 on 30th of
Yes.
June.
Many deportations
Yes,
on that
and
very date,
they
that very
deported.
month.
First of all, they were deported into Altai, and in 1941, in period of war, Stalin administration decided that they should exploit fish in Laptev Sea because those seas were occupied, Baltic Sea and Black Sea, and they, of course, from eastern part is Japan. And they decided to cultivate Arctic Ocean, and they started to build lagers. And my parents were arrested second time in Altai, and were imprisoned into those gulags. And from 1941 till 1955, they spent life in terrible conditions. Of course, I can't compare their life with me because, you know, their experience, they're strong. You know.
You must have had amazing parents. They must have been amazing people.
Yeah,
all of those stories of people with those experiences and how they managed to come back and maintain these feelings about where they had come from.
Yes, you are right, because we have. I have all my life in Soviet Union. I have status. Spec displaced plus per person status. I have no chance to move outside Soviet Union, and I was always under supervision of KGB. It was. I know that we received spec displaced persons in 1954. And then such spec displaced person status allow us to go from Arctic Ocean to southern part of Yakutia. But such status was always till 1990. My last, my last characteristics of my KGB file was done in 1990 on 11th of March. I have such. When we proclaimed our independence, you know, it means. But it helps to develop, sort of stance against such a regime and stance. And
so you and your family are back in Lithuania, and then you obviously excelled at school. I mean, because you brought yourself to medical school as an
yes,
adult.
first of all, you know that in Soviet time. It was obligatory to go to school because it was obligatory education, and I'm very happy. It helps me a lot to achieve. But I do not belong to no one ideological organization. You know, at that time we have children organization. It's called Oktobriatas. October children, and then pioneers, and then Komsomons. I not belong to.
Do you remember that? Do you remember those decisions? And because there was pressure to go along, even in areas that were not part of Russia proper.
Of course, it was not so easy. First of all, when I was a child, you know, my father told to teach us no. And I was proud, and teachers do not press me. But when I was in first class, then pioneers, then they asked me to allow. I said no, and then Komsomol once again no, because it was not so easy. But doesn't matter. It's my history. And and of course, also it was very important to have highest good results in education, because you can't imagine in Soviet Union there's competition between different organizations. You know, some red flags which were donated to those who achieved better results. And in class, you know, all children are Komsomol, and you are one not. But my achievements were absolutely on the highest level. and I was very proud to showing that we have compete in our knowledges at the same level. It's motivated to show that yes, we have positive approach and
as you pushed in academic achievement, then going to medical school, those pressures from the state would not have ceased. In fact, they must have intensified in strength.
Yes, you know, yes and not. First of all, you can understand that if I will decide to go to study law, it will be forbidden.
Because of your Spets designation.
Because, absolutely. If I will go to study some military, it will be forbidden. And if I will go to pedagogical issues, it will be for me closed. Or they do not allow me to. But when I came to medicines, it was of course open. No. And only one thing, to be prepared to defend your positions, knowledges, achievements, and so on, and to be capable to show your capacities. And of course, I was under supervision. Of course, in student time, I started to organize underground movement. We established some small students' organization in 1972. Such organization was from maybe 15 people. Of course, they discovered I was arrested once again, but they do not touch me because it was not enough fact, because we explained this our cultural activities and nothing more. And after finishing Kaunas Medical Institute, I was arrested in 1976 on 17th of September. It was my first arrest.
And you were already in a medical internship at that period.
Yes, and of course, but it was first time. But they allowed me to practice. I practiced all my time. And of course, I was in some restricted area, but it helped me to develop my practical skills, and it helped me to stay more or less high on professional level. And they know that my professional achievements were very well accepted by people. I have a lot of good results. And it helped me also to continue my ideas, to develop my second ground. I decided to study history. I don't know who can help me translate žodį Vilija. How can I translate word neakivaizdinės studijos?
Remote studies.
Yeah, I then decided to study history. Why? Because I have ideals, you know. First of all, I love very much my colleagues from previous time who were fighters on independence. A lot of medical doctors, starting with Vincas Kudirka, finishing with Dr. Kazis Grinius. They were my ideals. And I tried to do the same. And of course, I decided to go into deeper studies of history, being also medical doctor and historian, and being prepared myself to publicly confront with Soviet system. And of course, then it will be much stronger voice you know you know well prepared you know fighter, and it helped me to
Could you say a little bit more about the motivation of people in the anti-Soviet movement? So by this time in the 1970s, the military anti-Soviet movement, which had existed from after the war into the 1950s. So this is forest brothers, right? People who have who found refuge in the forest and during the daytime and will come out at night. They were found and eliminated by the late 1950s, and so this is a new kind of resistance. Could you talk about the motivation of this new civic kind of resistance? And it's a fairly small number of people still.
Yes,
the majority.
It still was quite small number of people. You know, personally, when I was involved in network of dissidents, I have more 114 or 120 addresses with those people with whom I communicated. That's all in Lithuania. In Latvia and Estonia, it was less. It was less, about 40, about 20 in Estonia. I know some of them personally till those days, and we were the generation which was from those who returned back from gulags, mainly, and those who kept on positions to continue the resistance and to teach their children to stay in the same position. And it helps us to develop our new approaches, new skills. And of course also situation was in changes. As you know, you remember 1968, Prague Spring. This was my time. I was in level of last stages of my school, and such Alexander Dubček and Czechoslovakian communists, for us, they create hope about socialism with human face. Not about Soviets, not about Stalinists, about Brezhnevists, but about absolutely different approach. And also, you know, it was important to have some information from Moscow, from those days Leningrad, from those dissidents who presented a lot of information about issues in so-called socialist camp, or which were under, and it helps us to go into, how to say, next stage of understanding that we need to build cultural resistance, intellectual resistance, so-called dissident movement, and to keep it high, to show such profile in society, to create some informal networks, and of course, and to develop new psychological behavior, which was different from official. But frankly speaking, connection with those who were deported and were, oppressed, such connection was. But style was absolutely different. Going
as opposed to those who were born in Lithuania.
Yes. And our style was different to understanding that we need to prepare ourselves to be strongest, to be much educated, to be much advanced, to be much progressive, to oppose communists. You know, it was very important to oppose communists publicly in our meetings, and they were in difficulties when I use the same language, the same theoretical formulas, quoting Marx and confusing them. And of course, and especially it was very dangerous. They you know, they have some so-called hours of ideological, how to say, awareness. And those hours we confronted very, very, very strongly. And of course, using the same, you know, articles from Karl Marx or from Friedrich Engels, not from Lenin or from Stalin. It's absolutely publicly, you know, they confused. It confused very much. I have a lot of meetings publicly debating that. Of course, you know that KGB called me a revisionist nationalist. Okay, it means okay. Revisionist, you know, I belong to those Mensheviks which were killed in Stalin type. And I am very proud today that today they really described my ideas. That yes, I was on democratic side of socialism, not on nationalism. But for them it was very, very dangerous to have those who can oppose, arguing about the same issues from different angles. When we started to discuss, for example, about democracy and socialism, I remember very well. I told them, I quote Bertrand Russell, that it is, you know, because Bertrand Russell was allowed as philosopher, and so I quote, look, but they told it is better be dead like your type of socialism. You know, it's immediately confused around. And I explained, you know, if you are real progressive, you should understand that progress is impossible without democracy. When they arrested me and started to investigate me, to question me, they asked, about what are you thinking? I told them very simple. You know what I told them? I can tell it in Russian and then translate into English. I told за Союз Советских Социалистических Республик. KGB officers. No, about what I mean. Look, за, it means yes and no. You have the right to be yes or no. It means democracy. Okay? Union. It means union on equal footing, on possibilities be in union or go out of union. Soviet, it means that you should promote that power should be in hands of democratically elected Soviets, not of those who usurpated powers and introduced dictatorship. And Republic, it means Respublikum, it means democratic elections. You know, I fully agree with concept about Soviet Union. Let's do it on normal democratic grounds. Once again, you know, they were very confused with my arguments, but it's reality.
So then in 1985, the Soviet Union gets a new leader. 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev comes to power. It's several years before this movement of allowing a restructuring, a perestroika of society happens. But by 1987, things are very different in all three Baltic republics. The movement, which had been small, now can be joined by many people to voice dissatisfaction. How did I'm sure you remember those years, 1987, 88.
I remember those years exactly in hours, minutes, seconds, days, nights, months, because it was really spring of nations. You know, this feeling when spring, and of course also I can tell you, Estonians were leading in this position. Estonians. My friend Mart Tarmak, he was very active in building Estonian front. And we have a relationship, with Estonians. Of course, in Lithuania, you can see new generation, which were not far from dissident movement. but they were under influence of environment which was around, because nobody can close doors, and not allowing people to understand what is in Finland, in Sweden, in Poland. Polish processes were very powerful. Solidarność, it was very, so big influence. And Estonians, they started to be the first. And it's create good opportunity that something should be done in Lithuania. But in our circles, in dissident circles, we were very worried about possibilities to be in front. Why? Because nobody knows how will react Moscow in this situation. And we started to influence more official and communist, Komsomols, more official but very known persons like Justinas Marcinkevičius, Arvydas Juozaitis, Romualdas Ozolas, doesn't matter a lot. And it helps to join forces. Dissidents were a little bit on the bench, and those who started to oppose publicly or propose perestroika. From the beginning it was movement in favor of support Gorbachev perestroika. And then we started to build network between those who knows much more about history and those who were involved because of Gorbachev perestroika opened new perspectives. And of course it takes time. There's no tasting water. In Lithuania, first activity was organized by Lithuanian Freedom Movement, Lietuvos Laisvės Lyga. Antanas Terleckas was the first. He was prisoner, he was dissident, he was very prominent, very strong, but such movement was very, very small. And when so-called officials joined perestroika and the ideas, and then you can't imagine as Brown movement that all things were changed in hours and hours. And of course then we decided to manifestate and to raise political slogans and organized parties. Can you imagine that we started to organize parties in 1988? In 1988, in Supreme Soviet Union, like it's called Съезд депутатов. At that time, from Lithuania, were
the Congress of Deputies.
Yes, there were 3 social democrats in 1988. For Gorbachev, it was a joke, They never take it seriously. But we started to organize also multi-party system within Sąjūdis movement, and it was successful. It was very successful.
And culturally as well, this was a springtime of peoples.
Yes.
Song festivals,
yes.
Other forms of literature, other forms of the arts started to flourish. A return to something that had existed in the past,
but
and that could now flourish again, clearly was palpable. I first came to the Baltic region actually in 1990. I was born in this country, and it was an amazing feeling. The strong sense of optimism, even though this was still happening within the state of the Soviet Union. Then Lithuania starts playing a leading role in 1990 politically.
Yeah. But why Lithuania started to play a leading role? First of all, we should bear in mind different situation with demography. Absolutely, because in Estonia, you know very well, it was 49% of Estonians, 51% of Russian speaking. In Latvia, it was more or less 50-50. In Lithuania, we have only 12% of Russian speaking. It was much more easier. And of course we have and of course also, please bear in mind that cultural activities in period of Soviet time from 1960s to 1980s were very close in cooperation between Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Song festivals, sport events, students exchanges, and all knows in Soviet Union that 3 Baltic states is west of the Union. In people's mind, it's not the same. It was west of the Union, something west. And we were very proud that a lot of young people were very proud that we are now some
Soviet West.
Soviet West. Yes, it was Soviet West. You're right. And of course, also you can imagine when sport events and play our basketball teams, Žalgiris against CSKA. It means, it creates a lot of emotions of proud. Or Tartu Kalev, or it's absolute Kalev. It means Kalev, it's a hero, national hero. It's a Žalgiris. It's a battle which is so important, and it creates proud of nationality, and such feeling that we are closer, we are something west. Of course, older generation has memory about occupation, about first period of independence. But the generation youngest also has feelings that they treated by Soviet, they treated a little bit different. And it helps a lot to and of course it has fermentation, it was very quick in period of 1987 and 1990. And it helps a lot to understand each other and to build networks and have brilliant networks, different organizations. And of course, Lithuania, because of demographic situation, was different.
So could you talk a little bit about 1991? It's in January of that year when, if there was a period where there was great fear that all of this westernization and all these changes might be turned back, seemed like a possibility in January of 1991.
Yes, I was in those events. I was, and the attack of Soviet troops. I was in front of our radio committee, not closer to tower, to TV tower, but radio committee, which was in my eyes. But what I can tell you, unity of nation was so high, you can't imagine. No fear, no absolute fear. And it's
despite the Spetsnaz,
despite
special
not
troops,
only
attack troops.
despite not only Spetsnaz. Can you imagine tanks? Tanks are going, and people are staying around and blocking and saying stop, tanks, and soldiers are absolutely in confusion because soldiers are in shock. Nobody knows what can they do. People are singing around tanks. That is such. And such feeling that, that it is our time. It's our glory and it is our victory. Feeling was like that. And you can see millions of people. Millions. All 2.5 million were on the streets. And of course the same speaking about in Latvia and in Estonia. And can you imagine that it was good feeling when in Moscow, in Leningrad, in Kiev, big demonstrations were in support. And such ties between democratic Russia and people who started to think that something is happened and never again return into Stalinistic time, it was very common in big area of Soviet Union. How can you explain demonstrations in hundreds of thousands of people demonstrations in Kiev, in Moscow, in Leningrad? It's fact, it's reality. Because feeling was that they should fight against those Bolsheviks or Stalinists or Brezhnevists and never turn such life back. And this helps a lot. It helps a lot, It's no fear on the streets. It's as excellent as picture when people are pushing back tank with hands. such picture should be disseminated in around the globe, like possibilities to fight in peaceful way against all military aggressions. It's symbolic picture.
And people were willing to push back with their votes as well. In March, in all three countries, referenda are held
Yes.
to end.
Yes, of course. And then
To end the Soviet
and then to organize referendum was so easy. Because, you know, it was absolutely within in no doubts with all rules and following the rules and procedures. It was not difficult to argue that people, let's come and vote in every family. It was in all three Baltic states. After those events, it helps us to once again to take second breath, and go forward. You know, it was absolutely
out of the Union.
yeah, and go. And then Union collapsed. Can you imagine what is feeling was in time
August.
of putsch
In August 1991.
Yes, August. And it was immediately our feeling was yes, finally, finally we achieved. And I remember such a period of life, like brilliant period of millions of positive people. And
So then you have a new career, or at least a continuation, and yet in new environment, in a sovereign state. So what was that like in the 1990s and into the early 2000s? A very different environment.
Of course. And then, of course, you know, after some big emotional unity, then came time of difficulty. I like very much, you know, sorry to say because I am here in the United States, but I was opponent so-called concept of constructive destruction. Sorry, friends. Such constructive destruction was on shoulders of ordinary people. So painful period of so-called reforms, privatization, crash of social standards. Crash. And of course, then you can see how it was. For me, it's very painful now to remembering. I remember very well a period of unity of nation, and then fragmentation of society. And such fragmentation was a very painful picture. And of course, then we started to rebuild once again positive approaches. And the crisis, economic crisis, was very deep. Life standards goes down. You know, it really was very difficult period between 1993 and 1997. More or less, we started to go. And of course, then the main hope was to join European Union. Main hope, because people, millions of people decided, yes, only one way, if we can join and achieve support, structural support of Union, and of course to develop, once again, to restore our living standards. And it was second breath of to be active and to go into more or less socially oriented market economy after jungles of privatization, and to go into, and it creates a lot of big support to joining EU, and of course also joining NATO. But NATO joining was much less, people were less worried about. They were much more worried about their living standards, and EU was as understanding that, okay, it will be our future. And you can see unity once again. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. You know, we spent a lot of time in Baltic Assembly. Mm-hmm. I am founding father of Baltic Assembly, one of founding fathers of Baltic Assembly. And then we spent a lot of difficult debates between us, and tensions and different views. First of all, then we started to compete who will be the first. maybe when the first will be invited into EU, then he will take second too. No, let's go together. Yeah. And it was brilliant time of different possibilities, and of course, and finally we decided no, it will be better once again to stay united and to achieve EU on the same pace. But of course, in EU and NATO, those two factors can once again restore feeling of, but because of crisis between 1992 and 1997 was very difficult.
So beginning in 2004, then things look a little bit different. We're getting a little bit closer to the present. You see, there are so many lives here that Dr. Andriukaitis has led, and we could talk about that. But I'm also sensitive to the fact that there are a number of people here, each with his or her own concerns. Some of them maybe about Lithuania, some of them maybe about the EU, some of them maybe about European-wide issues. So maybe at this point we could turn to questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand and we can pass you the microphone. And maybe you could just identify yourself briefly at the beginning. Could we go to questions?
Yeah, there's questions, answers, of course, because I see that
I'm sensing the passage of time.
From
we'll catch
body
up.
languages, people need to ask, but not because
Brad,
it's enough to listen.
Why don't I'll start off and ask a question about related to the EU. And your marvelous life story goes up to the time of the EU, but you've played an important role in the EU. Something many people probably don't know is that you were actually involved, even before Lithuania joined officially, in the negotiation of the treaty establishing a constitution for Europe, the 2002-2004 project that failed in a referendum in France and the Netherlands, but then was revived in a slimmed down, downsized version in the Treaty of Lisbon. And then lo and behold, several years later, you're a member of the European Commission. And I wondered if you could say something about your experience as a member of the College of Commissioners in the EU, both representing Lithuania, but now also representing, as commissioners do, the EU as a whole.
Openly, I will tell you, I am very happy that I'm a commissioner now. Why? Because it's a very difficult period for Union. Really. Union is in crossroads. And when we came into Commission in 2014, we faced immediate crisis with first of all, we have five countries: Ireland, Portugal, Spain, Italy, Greece. And it was Brexit, you remember. It was so difficult, and Cameron decided to play game, to telling that he can ask us how to strengthen EU, proposals which are weakens EU, not strengthen. And which for me is very strange. But they propose to change wording that ever closer union in Lisbon Treaty, to delete ever closer union. You know who proposed such wording, ever closer union, in treaty establishing constitution for Europe? It was British conservatives. Only after inserting ever closer union, I have a joke, ever closer union, it means distance between English Channel, ever closer union with British Channel, and it's always closer, constantly, It's, but it was their proposal. And then Cameron started to argue that it should be deleted because it's very bad. It was a real example of hypocrisy. Okay, started to play a game. And on one hand, Brexit, like, like some journalists started to call it. In another, what can we do with Cameron's proposals? And in third, big crisis in 5 countries. And immediately after, it was started of the serious crisis, big flow of refugees and migrants. And Europe was in turbulences. But we are proud. I am very proud about Jean-Claude. Jean-Claude, he is very clever. Of course, maybe not so visible, but he is very clever, experienced guy. Brilliant. He calls me in college Mr. Gulag. I am proud about that. Always. Mr. Gulag, what is your opinion? Okay, let's advise. And it really shows that we spent a lot of time dealing with very tough challenges. First of all, we decided to do our best, helping Greece not to go out of Eurozone, because it will be repercussions with difficulty. And it takes a lot of efforts, and then second, immediately we started to discuss with Cameron, what can we do? Which wording will be more acceptable to propose that he really improved and British referendum. Nobody accepts the results, all thought about more or less optimistic scenario, 53, 47, 54, 45, 52, but nobody expects that it will be opposite. Of course, UK society now is in deep divide. We all know that. And the results were shocking. And after, we started to manage situation with Turkey. Which internal Turkish issues are very complicated one. And of course, we started to navigate. How can we achieve agreement controlling flow of refugees and flow of smugglers? Because it is not about refugees, it's about smugglers, it's about illegal migrants. It is the main most challenge which should be addressed. And I am very proud that we were on the ground. We have a lot of experience dealing with very difficult issues in Lesbos Island, in everywhere. And finally, crisis with Maidan air crisis in Crimea. It was once again. And of course, ISIS attacks within European Union. Can you imagine in our mandate? I am very proud that in our mandate we have a lot of challenges. Look, and we survive. We survive. And we presented to people that yes, European Union model is vital. But it's not easy. Every day is a difficult job, day and night. And of course, you look at economic development. Of course, more or less economic stabilization. 2008 economic crisis affects a lot of people's lives. Why now today the people are following some more radical, more populistic approaches? Italy, or Hungary, or Poland, because of people lost a lot of feeling that they are secure, that their living standards are more or less 55 million people are empowered in European Union. It's not so not so simple picture. And how can we restore trust in European project? And now it is vital question: how can we restore trust in European model? Because it's not easy task. And I think experience which has helped us to act with different challenges. I am very proud that we have a lot of experienced people in our team, because all prime ministers or ministers or or commissioners second time. It helps us to create team building approach. And okay, we show that we are. I am proud that we survive. And now is possibility to send positive message, because now we have very important relationship with United States administration. More or less, we are in a way to find behavior, to behave. Wow. Okay, but that's it. But frankly speaking, I think that this commission was under big pressing of very big difficulties, and we once again we approved the European Union model as capable model, as capable. From my point of view, it is unique. Yes, I am proud. It's unique. Of course, if you compare treaty establishing constitution for Europe mechanism with Lisbon Treaty mechanisms are weaker compared to those mechanisms which were proposed by convention. And it's a pity. But European Union, if we will be successful adapting, if we would be successful adapting such constitutional treaty, European Union today would be much stronger. But I am optimistic. Sorry, I am optimistic.
Is there a question in the back?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the wonderful talk. So my question has two parts to it. One of them is, you talked a lot about the unity of the nation and the fragmentation of that union after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So do you think that was because we lost an external enemy? And then the second part of the question, how united do you think Lithuania is now, and what are some of the biggest challenges to that unity?
Now, I think that such external enemy, like to say, yes, from United States point of view, you have external enemy because it was a period of Cold War. We were inside. And inside, I have not external enemies. I have a number of big friends between Russians, Ukrainians, Latvians, Estonians, Kazakhs. It is for me painful today to say that I lost a lot of friends. And it's very painful process. But we don't in time of January events, Moscow Democrats, Starovoytova, they were friends. We have no understanding that we will be enemies. We know that enemies were different, but not people on the streets. And now today, between a number of ordinary people, the memory that they have golden time when they were friends is remain. But fragmentation has social and economic factor. This is the main question. Because crisis and shockotherapy was very painful experiment. I am joking because I compare communists with those who proposed constructive destruction. Because in both cases, you can do experiments with people's lives. Sorry, it will be better to do experiments with animals, not with people's lives. Okay, doesn't matter. It's about joke. But reality was that crisis was very difficult for people, and it was fragmentation. And now today, fragmentation has different also composition. Now we do not have industrial society. you young generation now absolutely different compared to us, who remember trade unions, factories, and so on. Absolutely different. Now you are working on temporary, agreements, 3 jobs per day, computers, and so on, Uber and Visaki, and it's individualization of younger generation is very visible, and solidarity is also very important feeling. And so my generation was in big crash because post-industrial situation, deep crisis, and fragmentation has economic aspects, and not about possibility to understand that it's enemy. Of course, what is painful for me is that Cold War ended, but language of Cold War continued to exist. And it is for me a little bit strange, because it will be better to create new language and new options and to see how can we create our relationship based on multilateralism and based on different new possibilities, going out of oldest understanding, going out of Cold War, because it is way nothing. Rightly mentioned, some my friends mentioned that walls never replace bridges. Walls have different meaning than bridges. It is better to build bridges. Of course, it is difficult, I know, but I believe that we can build new bridges despite today's some slogans that one country should be first. I don't know which country should be first. For me, it's not I have not big interest about be first. For me, it will be much interesting to see solidarity and development of planet in more consistent, more sustainable way. And sustainability require new mechanisms, and it's time to rethink our
Sorry, are you applying that metaphor of the bridges eastward as in addition to westward? Because right now it does feel like, at least in this country, that there's a new Cold War with Russia.
Yes, I feel that it will be better to build bridges than nuclear wars. And personally, I am very happy that European Union approach to have now to introduce sanctions, 1 point. Second, to ask follow Minsk agreements, to implement Minsk agreements for all sides. Third, to have selective engagement, because we have questions where we need to have real pragmatism. And fourth, to build ties people to people. And this is very important, to build ties within people and people. Believe me, for me it's better to build bridges between people, between scientists, between doctors, between students, to build, to go out of language of wars. It's better to build peace than war. From my point of view, it's very simple, but also it's difficult to achieve. I know that.
Please, more questions.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I just want to tell you that in 91, after the putsch in Moscow, where I was, 4 days after 19, the putsch, I was in the Baltic countries as a librarian, going from Estonia, Latvia to Lithuania, and I witnessed a lot of excitement, and I saw national libraries in Lithuania turned into medical first aid punct to take care of wounded who were just attacked by hormones and so forth. Anyway, I built a lot of
It was in
bridges.
January 1991, 13th
No,
of
no, I
January.
was there after August putsch. It was
But,
late dates of
was
August
less.
and
Yeah, it was, but was less.
and then the main issue when I was in Lithuania was: what is Bush doing? Is he going to recognize Lithuania as an independent state? And as I was leaving on the 3rd of September, I heard the news. Yes, he did recognize it. But I had the honor of being an American there before that, and everybody was wonderful to me, and I have great memories. But I have a question, security question. I just came back from Croatia, and the president of Croatia, Kolinda Kitarovic, is talking a lot about 3 seas union, like Baltic Sea, Black Sea, Adriatic Seas, and countries around these seas, sort of a cooperation, economic cooperation, security cooperation, and so forth. It's pretty popular idea in Croatia, but I would like to hear from you, is this also popular in Lithuania and in other Baltic countries?
Regional cooperation is not only because of regions, but because European Union policies. We have 5 big so-called regional cooperative mechanisms. Danube region, Mediterranean, Baltic region, and Central European and Pyrenean region. Why? Because it is because it is very practical. It's very practical to if you look at possibilities to build networks between electricity grids. It's very practical. Or if you see possibilities to develop roads and of course build some green power stations. Of course, also it's very, very good instrument to encourage regional governments cooperate in the same way, using structural funds in more synergetic way. Planning together, because if you are planning infrastructure, you should understand you need, if one country will build in this way, another in another, you never can achieve effectiveness because you need to have interconnection. And regionalization is very practical idea. And speaking about feeling, all countries feel that they have their national identity, and it is okay. It's okay. Every country national identity is asset of European Union. From my portfolio, I can tell you very simple. When I am going to member states, I ask which food is the best. Italian, ours. Hungarian, ours. Lithuanian, ours. All countries are ready to defend that they proclaim they are produced the best food. It means that generally we have European Union best food in the world. Yes, and it is so close to people's hearts. I see a little bit, strange feelings when the people confronted national identity with European, feeling of European solidarity. If you are playing game as nationalist, it's different one thing. Or if you are playing as protectionist, I have difficult discussions with Polish government, with Hungarians. We have this enough difficulties now with Italy, because they should understand that they should understand that they are not alone, that they have a regional cooperation. For example, in Italy, you can listen that they are ready to defend Italian farmers. My question is, are you ready to defend Croatian farmers? Because it's not so far. It's in different sides of Adriatic Sea, or Slovenia. So what are you thinking about only Italian food? But and I am playing game a little bit with those guys who are using such language. But regionalization of some real project is very good, very workable. But of course, it's not in confrontation with possibilities of common pan-European border guard, because we know that and of course also regionalization can help us achieve more solidarity, because then people understand, okay, if I am in solidarity with Estonians, Latvians, it means that it is natural. But how can I be in solidarity with Greece? Greece is so far from Lithuanian understanding. But if you can develop solidarity feeling between three or four at regional level, it helps us to build more ties between different actors. I do not see dangers in this situation.
So you've been now 4 years, or nearly 4 years, as the Commissioner for Health and Food Safety. Can you speak a little bit more about the accomplishments that you've seen over the last 4 years?
About accomplishments?
Yeah. Well, or
maybe about fraud. Food fraud. Let's go directly. Food fraud. Okay. Or double standards in dual quality in food and so on. Yes, we are not living in ideal world. Absolutely. And of course, food fraud is very now sometimes you see very sophisticated issues. It's very difficult to detect, because of technologies now allow to deviate. And it is big concern for us. We now have very excellent laboratories at joint research center level. But those laboratories are capable in some cases to detect only 40% or 50% of fraud. But it is about laboratory. But then speaking about possibility to investigate, to achieve information, to have to combine our forces with Olaf, with prosecutors, with customs officers. Then of course we have enough instruments to fight against food fraud. But sometimes horse meat scandal was very painful scandal, and it's one scandal can diminish trust in food safety very much. Fipronil case it was about fraud. But in one hand we show our effectiveness, because in fipronil we detected in whole European Union market. Please bear in mind, EU every day produced 300 million eggs every day, and our goal was to detect 60 million eggs in such big amount of eggs in Europe, and we achieved. In 1 week, it means that we are capable to address those issues. But impact on people perception is always creates negative issues. And we have very high attention. And now we after fipronil lessons, now we have more coordinated systems between prosecutors, Olafs, customs, and food safety authorities. And now we established 3 links between different IT tools which are used to detect the situation. Of course, also, you can't avoid new cases. It's absolutely, we are in dynamic. But but those smugglers are also very, they are very innovative. Sometimes.
Is there another question? Please, Professor Cameron.
I can't resist asking you a question about one of the current crises among the many that you've been talking about, and that is the Brexit negotiation. Last week, the European Council President Tusk was quite concerned about the lack of progress. Theresa May went back to the UK, and the day after meeting with the rest of the members of the European Council said that we were at an impasse. And I'm curious what you think about the likelihood of a deal, a good deal for the EU and a good deal for the UK, as opposed to a no deal in which the UK goes off the cliff edge next March 29th. And I know that the task force, the Commission task force of Monsieur Barnier has been working very hard to try to bring the sides together. But we now have a summit happening in October, on October 18th, a summit tentatively planned in November, another summit in December, but the Article 50 clock is ticking and the time is running out. So what do you see in terms of the state of play in the Brexit negotiation? I can't help asking, since my name is David Cameron also. It's a very common name.
Yes, but unfortunately, I am in very now sensitive position. And of course, first of all, let's be clear. Commission, from the beginning, started to work on all possible scenarios. On all. Because it's our job. It's not to say, oh, sorry, if something, no deal, we are not prepared. No. We have, if no deal, we have action plan. If another version, okay. And now, of course, you know very well that about 87, 89% of all issues are solved. Some of them are very technical and very difficult, but they are solved. It means that we are going into area where some difficulties. Of course, you know very well, Irish border is very complex, very complex. But I think that now up to UK to respond to our proposals. I have no chance to go into details because I am under rules and procedures. But it is. And I think, from my point of view, it will be better that leaders will be more involved in homework and less in sending different messages to society. It will be much more helpful. Because when some leaders decided to send message one, response another, commentators around, and political processes in different directions. Of course, we know that Theresa May have difficulties in her own party. Politically, much more complicated situation within Conservative Party. But it's not up to us to advise, and of course also how difficult it is with unionists. They are in coalition, and it's up to them to solve their homework, because some rational arguments are on the table. And my feeling is that the clock is ticking, and when clock is ticking, rational arguments can prevail. But from both sides, we have a lot of rational arguments. How can we? Because we all know that no deal means negative impact from both sides, but believe me, 450 million consumers and 80 million consumers are a little bit different one. And of course, impact on EU will be less than impact on UK, because it's reality. Of course, we know very well that it will have impact. Which one? Difficult. But now on the table are rational proposals from both sides. And teams are working day and night. And clock is ticking, okay, but let's wait. But because it's not so, it's not a game that we do not have some solutions. But now is also time to consolidate political acceptance, especially in UK, but because of 27 are united. We have no divisions. But divisions are in UK, and it's up to them to now to consolidate, because they need then to approve in Parliament. They should consolidate situation. If they can achieve such consolidation, then I think that more or less reasonable arguments are on the table, and it is a lot of reasonable arguments. But I am open. Yes, we have also scenario if it means that our obligation is to immediately present mechanisms which should be valid in every case.
There's time maybe for one more question. Please.
Thank you very much for wonderful talking. I'm a master's student of European and Russian Studies here at Yale University. I would like
Could
to...
you speak up just a tiny bit?
Yes, if it's possible. Okay.
Is it all right? I would like to ask you about your feeling of identity or sense of belonging, because I assume that when you were very little, you regarded yourself as a Soviet, or at least your world was created by the Soviet Union, since it is the only environment you were facing or you were put on. But now you came back to Lithuania and you are working for European Union. So I am just curious that when do you remember, or when is there any critical event to change your feeling of identity or sense of belonging? To when did you start feeling you were European, not as a Soviet?
Okay. You know, maybe because I studied history and was very deep involved into ancient time of history, and it helped me to be European all my life. All my life. I have no difference. You know, for me, it's a little bit strange when they can make distance. Second, please explain to me, what does it mean to be European and to be Lithuanian? Latin alphabet is the same. Religious traditions, more or less, is the same. Education, more or less, the same. Possibilities to see environment around you, to play football. You are not using football here, soccer. Soccer, the same. Played basketball, younger generation knows very well, the same. You know, identity is very important issue if you are never worried about your identity, because I'm Lithuanian. I never have doubts that I'm not Lithuanian. But if you are playing game with identities, playing game, you know, my identity is the best in the world, okay, then this is very dangerous. Because if you are going into racism and into experience of European history, what is with National Socialism? It was the highest level of racism, Aryan, they were terrible, bestialism. But it was based on feeling that they started to play games that are German, they are Supermans. It is very, that is the problem. And of course, to be European, now I'm very proud that I see millions of people who are Italians, Lithuanians, Finns, Estonians, and together they are Europeans. In the European Commission, it's full international. In my cabinet, I have 16 people from 16 nations. And they are using their own language. They are using French, German, English, Spanish. My team, Italians, Lithuanians, and Romanians. Please look, 3 teams. We all are Europeans. But no one is in confrontation. You know, I think it's a little bit artificial to. It's now we have about 60 million people who are working in different countries in EU, being Italian working in Lithuania, or being Lithuanians working in United Kingdom. It's really, and such number is growing because of a lot of different options. And of course also internet, it creates a lot of possibilities to feel. I always quote one old story from meeting between Alexander the Great and Diogenes. Diogenes was sitting on the beach and thinking about, and Alexander the Great came to him and invited him to follow Alexander to fighting with Persians. Diogenes told him, you know, I do not see need to go together. Why? Because your intervention require a lot of people's lives. I am not ready to follow you. But Alexander told him, look, but we will build new world, you know, going into. Diogenes' answer was very simple. You know, I am building new world where I am staying. Because where I'm staying, there is center of the world. And I'm responsible to build something. Why you ask me to intervene something where nothing will be changed? Because I am where I am. I am Greek, but I am cosmopolitan. You know, he pronounced such word, cosmopolitan. I am citizen of the world. And I am Lithuanian, I am European, the same. For me, it's very simple.
That's a wonderful story. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Dr. Vytenis Andriukaitis for spending this wonderful hour and a half with us.
Thank you.
It's been fascinating. Thank you. Thank you very much.